Hey everybody, Proverbs 16:23 today, which says, "The heart of the wise makes his speech judicious and adds persuasiveness to his lips." The heart of the wise, what's inside of a wise man, makes his speech judicious and adds persuasiveness to his lips. I want to talk today about justifying something. Justifying your actions to yourself or to somebody else. Even if you're engaged in some sort of sale or if you're trying to convince somebody of a certain position. There's all sorts of techniques regarding persuasion. Maybe you remember writing persuasive papers in school. Sometimes you got to persuade somebody else. Sometimes you got to persuade yourself even. Sometimes we even try to persuade God of things that we're doing. We try to justify that what I'm doing is right, or this decision would be good for you, or this is the best way. No, I really did know what I was doing. And there's all sorts of techniques you can get into. And, I used to be in a position that required some sales techniques from me. And there's lots of things that you can do to increase your persuasiveness. But there's a line that you cross where you're no longer seeking to be persuasive, but instead you're being manipulative, or you're being sneaky or tricky. And that all comes into play and becomes necessary when the thing that you're trying to convince somebody of is not wise. So if you want to do something and you know it's a bad idea, you know that it's dumb, you're going to regret it later, but you're trying to convince yourself or your wife or your mother or somebody, your boss, of why it's a good idea, you've got to get sneaky. You got to come up with tricks in order to be persuasive. If you're trying to sell somebody something that they don't need, that they don't want, that isn't good for them, you can't just talk about the merits of that car. You've got to try and be sneaky and persuasive. To persuade a country or a family of a course of action, you've got to be tricky in order to get what you want if it's not a good thing. So, how do we avoid this? How can we be persuasive all the time? How can you always be convincing in what you're trying to convince people of? Well, it's very simple. Do the wise thing. Do the right thing. If you want to be able to convince yourself that what you're doing is right, my friend, do what's right. If you want to try to convince somebody that this purchase would be good for them, only sell things or try to engage in sales that are going to be helpful and good to that person. If you want to try to advocate for a certain way of life or a certain course of action, make sure it's a wise course of action. The heart of a wise man makes his speech judicious and adds persuasiveness to his lips, because it's very easy to defend the right thing to do. It's very easy to convince people to go along with you. You can put your whole heart and soul into something if you know that it's right and it's good. But if you don't, you've got to try to get sneaky. So listen, if you feel like you're always trying to have to defend yourself and convince somebody that what you did was right, you're probably not doing the right thing. Instead, try to do what's right and try to do what's wise. And this might involve some initial shaking up, right? If you're in a job where you've got to lie all the time about sales or whatever it is, or if you're constantly having to get your family to go one way and you know it's not right, then when you first start doing the right thing, it's going to take some getting used to. You might lose friends or lose a job or lose trust from your family at first. But that wisdom that you're seeking will make you judicious, and it'll make the things you say persuasive, because you're not having to trick anybody. It doesn't depend on you. It depends on God and His righteousness and His wisdom. So think about that today. We'll see you next time.